about a mile deep there, but we plan to use a sled equipped with a magnet that will attract the small fragments and collect them. And we will go back and forth across the region of interest, just like mowing the lawn, for a couple of weeks, and we hope to find those fragments. We hope, just like detectives, to collect enough evidence that will tell us the origins of this object.
If the project is successful, it will mark the first time humanity has recovered material from another solar system.
Whatever we find will have a big impact on our understanding of interstellar objects.
But what excited Dr. Loeb the most about the meteor isn't where it came from, but what it might contain.
The reason that the meteor is interesting is because the possibility that it may have been a spacecraft propelled artificially and made of some alloy that is much tougher than iron meteorites. If we do end up concluding that it was artificial in origin, perhaps a spacecraft, that would be the first time that we found evidence for an object that originated from another civilization.
Could the remnants of an extraterrestrial spacecraft really be lying at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean? While it may be a sensational notion, the possibility has excited researchers around the world.
So there's talk that maybe we should try to capture this material that plunged into the Pacific. Because who knows, maybe it was sent here by an alien civilization in outer space. Now the probability of that happening is very small, let's face it. It's a long shot. But hey, science is based on long shots. You never know when the next discovery is being made. And so I think it's worthwhile to try to see whether we can retrieve this object.
This object may contain some type of extraterrestrial technology or some type of an extraterrestrial signature that points towards intelligence. If they can find this object and study it, it could potentially be one of the greatest discoveries in human history. According to ancient astronaut theorists, the findings may help answer an essential question. Have alien civilizations from across the galaxy been sending materials to Earth for eons with the deliberate intention of developing our planet, altering evolution, and setting us on a path to our future?
Perhaps, out of all these things that crash into the Earth's atmosphere, some percentage of them could be of extraterrestrial origin. And if we go and look at all of these, as many as we can find, perhaps we'll find that one needle in the haystack that tells us this is a device or it impacted the Earth that came from outside of our solar system and from some advanced civilization.
Maybe we'll find new DNA, or we'll find new building blocks for life. Life that we didn't even know could even exist. And what implications does that have for us? Were meteors deliberately sent to Earth to terraform the planet, enabling the development of intelligent life and a technologically advanced civilization? And if so, are extraterrestrials continuing to direct the evolution of both the planet and humanity through meteor impacts today? Perhaps the proof lies not in the skies above, but in plain sight here on Earth. And it is there we must look for the undeniable evidence of our connection to the cosmos. has announced that a new spending bill will require the U.S. Defense Department to review UFO sightings dating to 1945. Another major headline involves controversial claims by a U.S. congressman of a huge UFO cover-up. And yet another claimed that a UFO was shot down by the Russian military. In today's world, UFO reports are no longer a fringe curiosity, but part of the daily news cycle.
Finally, in the 21st century, you got the whole world curious. Everybody's looking for real UFOs. Headlines in every newspaper, everywhere. Every television, every radio, every cell phone. Things like NASA announces unidentified aerial phenomena study. The big headline in the New York Times having to do with UFOs doing remarkable demonstrations in front of military pilots.
It's suddenly respectable for these topics to be discussed in the open. The level of official interest, the level of scientific interest, and media interest is to the point where now we can look at evidence that's been sitting around for decades that hasn't been scrutinized. And finally, it's getting some scrutiny. It's getting attention. That is a sea change. And because of the media interest, the topic became acceptable for Congress. There was political cover for them to go ahead and ask questions.
In May 2022, there was an unprecedented congressional hearing from one of the subcommittees of the House Intelligence Committee. A lot of it was in public, and some absolutely fascinating information was disclosed. I mean, effectively, this was an admission that the phenomenon was real.
We know that our service members have encountered unidentified aerial phenomena, and because UAPs pose potential flight safety and general security risk, we are committed to a focused effort to determine their origins.
U.S. Congress paying serious attention to it, that these objects are undoubtedly real. They're not figments of the imagination, they're not hoaxes. There are objects up there that are legitimate mysteries. Considering the recent explosion of UFO reports, is it possible that there is, in fact, an extraterrestrial? And if so, have there been encounters not only with strange objects in the sky, but also with alien entities?
Now we're kind of saying, well, UFOs are real, these craft are real. The next logical question is, have people engaged entities, intelligences, that operate these craft? Whether it be biological or artificial intelligence or some sort of marriage between the two.
Dr. Travis Taylor, who was hired as the chief scientist for the U.S. government's UAP task force in 2019, says that in his experience, while UFO sightings are no longer scoffed at, the same cannot be said for reports of much closer encounters.
If an F-18 pilot came to you and said, we chased a UAP in the sky with our fighter plane and couldn't catch it, you're going to listen to that guy. But if the same fighter pilot came and said, I was flying along in my F-18 and a UAP came down and abducted me from my cockpit, took me off, did something to me and brought me back, put me right back in my cockpit as though I'd never been gone, you would think he's crazy. Why? Why is that? You're going to listen to that guy. But if the same fighter pilot came and said,
Dad, the same cannot be said for reports of much closer encounters.
if an F-18 pilot came to you and said, we chased a UAP in the sky with our fighter plane and couldn't catch it, you're going to listen to that guy. But if the same fighter pilot came and said, I was flying along in my F-18 and a UAP came down and abducted me from my cockpit, took me off, did something to me and brought me back, put me right back in my cockpit as though I'd never been gone, you would think he's crazy. Why? Why is that any more fantastic? And there being something we can't explain what it is that we can't catch with a modern day fighter plane. I think each are equally fantastic and should at least be considered.
One of the first people to suggest that reports of close encounters with extraterrestrials should be taken seriously was the man who held Travis Taylor's position more than 60 years prior, astrophysicist J. Allen Hynek. In 1952, Hynek was the scientific consultant for Project Blue Book, the U.S. government's first public investigation into the UFO phenomenon. According to J. Allen Hynek's son, one of the cases his father found most compelling involved an encounter with alien entities.
My father didn't talk that much about individual cases, but there were some cases that really stood out to him. One was the case of Lonnie Zamora in 1964, New Mexico. Lonnie Zamora was a policeman, and he saw some kind of craft in the sky land. In the egg-shaped craft, he saw some humanoids come out, fairly brief encounter, and they talked. Lonnie Zamora had not been active in UFOs or flying saucers before that. My father thought he was very credible, and it was the case that was maybe the straw that broke the camel's back on my father being more comfortable talking publicly about abduction cases and humanoids.
Of the 12,618 sightings reported to Project Blue Book, 701 were left unexplained, including the case of policeman Lonnie Zamora. Yet, despite the hundreds of unsolved close encounters, the government shut down Project Blue Book in 1969. But not before J. Allen Hynek made arguably his most famous contribution to the UFO phenomenon.
My father, being a scientist, decided that UFOs needed to have a classification system. So he came up with the close encounters of the first, second, and third kind. A close encounter of the first kind is a visual sighting within 500 feet or so. A close encounter of the second kind is where there's some kind of physical evidence, a sunburned face, broken tree branches, radar sighting, etc. And the close encounter of the third kind is where you actually see some type of creature.
Following the demise of Project Blue Book, claims of even more bizarre alien encounters started being reported across the globe. And two more categories of close encounters were identified. A close encounter of the fourth kind indicates an alien abduction. And a close encounter of the fifth kind involves communication and interaction with an alien entity.
Close encounters of the fifth kind are essentially human interactions with extraterrestrials. It's not just seeing, it's being a participant in an event. There is often, for example, direct communication, either verbal or telepathic. And this is particularly interesting because what we get is not just description and perceptions, but often information. Messages are sometimes given in this two-way interactive communication. And that's fascinating because it gives us perhaps our best insight into extraterrestrial motivation.
Accounts of close encounters of the fifth kind are often regarded as too sensational to be true. But according to ancient astronaut theorists, such face-to-face interactions with extraterrestrials can be found throughout recorded history.
Throughout the history of humankind, cultures from all continents of the world described someone descending from the sky and imparting knowledge. And instead of attributing these stories to pure fantasy, the ancient astronaut theory proposes that contact between physical extraterrestrials and our
our human ancestors happened face to face? Could it be that the designation, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, is not merely terminology for potential alien encounters in the distant future, but describes interactions that have been happening on Earth for thousands of years? Perhaps clues can be found by examining claims of such encounters within the highest levels of the United States government. Yucca Flat, Nevada, May 19, 1953. At 5:05 a.m., one of a series of nuclear tests under the umbrella code name of Shawnee is set off. Within seconds of the blast, the disc-shaped object is seen rapidly descending from the sky, headed south toward Las Vegas, then disappearing into the mountains. Just 2 days after this event, government officials secretly gathered a team of scientists for a curious assignment. They were to investigate the crash of an unidentified flying object on the outskirts of Kingman, Arizona, a city 175 miles south of the nuclear test site.
There were 14 engineers that boarded a bus, and we took a long 3.5-hour ride from Phoenix to Kingman. When they got there, it was nighttime. There were MPs on all corners of the craft. It's about a 40-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that was perfectly intact. There were 4 beings associated with this craft, and they shipped it to Groom Lake.
Groom Lake was the Area 51 region in Nevada. When Area 51 was just bare bones, they took the craft and the aliens out to that location in the middle of the Nevada desert because it was so remote. And around that they built Area 51.
Hidden within a ring of mountains deep in the Nevada desert, Area 51 is a top-secret military installation that has long been rumored to hold evidence of alien technology. And there are even stories that a special facility at Area 51 once held a survivor of the 1953 Kingman UFO crash, an alien entity known as J-Rod.
J-Rod is an alien who allegedly worked at Area 51 over a period of years, and it was J-Rod's mission or duty to help reverse engineer technology that was apparently from the 1953 Kingman UFO crash. J-Rod was one of the crash survivors and worked directly with our own government.
Captain Bill Newhouse, a former Navy pilot who later worked for the U.S. Air Force performing experimental testing on aircraft, was assigned to Area 51 in the mid-1960s. And he claims that he not only studied the craft that allegedly crashed in Kingman, Arizona, but also had direct contact with J-Rod.
We had a long period of introduction into meeting, the alien. And I call him J-Rod. That's the name that the linguist gave him. And he would talk, but he'd sound just like, if you spoke, he'd sound like him. He was like one of these, a parrot. But he'd try and answer your question, Basically, it was only engineering advice or science advice.
There's also another whistleblower by the name of Dan Burish. And Dan Burish said that he was hired as a microbiologist to basically care for J-Rod, ensuring that he remained healthy. And this went on for years and years and years.
According to Dan Burish and Bill Newhouse, J-Rod was housed in a special underground chamber at Area 51. And there have been numerous other accounts of extraterrestrials working with the United States government.
There's a lot of stories that we worked with the aliens at Area 51, or some say at a base nearby, kind of in the desert out there. And we've been working with them in underground labs and they have been sharing information for us to enhance our technologies.
Is it possible that the United States government has met with and worked with entities like J-Rod and other alien visitors since at least the 1950s? According to UFO researchers, there is evidence that extraterrestrials have not only been held at secret military bases, but have even met face-to-face with the commander-in-chief inside the walls of the Pentagon. One of the most detailed accounts of a presidential close encounter is the story of an otherworldly visitor named Valiant Thor.
The story of Valiant Thor comes from a gentleman by the name of Frank Stranges, who's a chaplain and apparently held a top secret clearance. As the story goes, in 1957, a UFO landed in Virginia, very close to Washington, D.C. Police officers were called to the scene, and out stepped a human-looking gentleman who wanted to visit with then President Eisenhower. He was taken directly to the Pentagon and was able to arrange a meeting with President Eisenhower. In this meeting, he basically stated that he was very much concerned about our use of nuclear weapons.
Just as another country would post an ambassador to the United States, the theory was that Valiant Thor was the ambassador from the extraterrestrials, and he was from time to time advising President Eisenhower and the US government on policy issues.
This idea that an actual physical extraterrestrial visitor could potentially be influencing the course of the world is a possibility. I am sure there's envoys out there that do the same thing, not just on a planet, but in entire planetary systems. Could it be that the United States has had diplomatic relations with otherworldly beings? And if so, do they continue even today? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and suggest there is evidence that extraterrestrials have also attempted to make contact with the British monarchy. London, England, April 9th, 2021. Across the United Kingdom, people gather to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth's husband, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, who passed away at the age of 99. In the months after his death, reports begin to surface that Prince Philip spent more than half his life investigating claims of alien close encounters. In the process, he allegedly amassed a trove of secret evidence that's been coined the Royal X-Files, and that has never been viewed by the public.
Prince Philip had a lifelong fascination, and I would even say more than fascination, I would say a serious interest in UFOs.
He read all the books. He was actually secretly going to the media and saying, hey, the Americans are writing these great books, you guys need to serialize these. And he convinced them to do that.
This was not generally known, of course, because it would have caused something of a scandal. The irony being that Ministry of Defense policy was to play down the subject of UFOs, but here were our royal bosses absolutely fascinated by it.
In order to escape public ridicule and provide cover for the royal family, Prince Philip enlisted the service of the former commander of the Royal Air Force, Sir Peter Horsley, to secretly investigate reported sightings and encounters.
Prince Philip charged Sir Peter Horsley to contact the MOD, the Ministry of Defense, and provide first-hand reports of UFO encounters, UAP encounters. And not only that, his other assistant brought in first-hand witnesses to talk face-to-face with Prince Philip about UFOs.
In his autobiography titled Sounds from Another Room, Sir Peter Horsley recounts meeting a bizarre individual during his investigations on behalf of the Prince of Edinburgh.
In this memoir, he talks about meeting an individual by the name of Mr. Janus. He met face to face with this gentleman who was entirely human looking, but it became very clear to him from the beginning that this was not a normal person. For one thing, he seemed to be able to read Sir Peter Horsley's mind. He apparently had telepathic abilities. And not only that, he began to talk about subjects such as UFOs, space travel, even time travel. I think the thing that impressed Sir Peter Horsley most was that this individual, Mr. Janus, knew all of Britain's nuclear secrets. He knew all about where materials were being kept, all the activity that was going on. He seemed to know all of it.
Mr. Janus says, well, I need to have a meeting with Prince Philip. And Horsley is like, well, you don't just walk in and have a meeting with the prince. Horsley was a very sophisticated, intelligent man. But Horsley walked out of that room convinced that this was an extraterrestrial.
And he apparently talked about some sort of galactic council and there being interest in planet Earth, but there was a genuine prospect of nuclear